And in that connection,
Yes, good.
you have invited me to deliver lecture on Pandeyji. Well, Sangal Pandeyji was born in the year 1929 and he died in the year 2002. He was deeply rooted and well trained in Indian philosophical tradition, but at the same time, he had a perfect mastery over Western philosophical tradition. He was appointed lecturer in the Department of Philosophy in the year 1953 and retired as professor and head in the year 1990. And for 2 years, he was professor emeritus from 1990 to 1992. His philosophical contribution is immense and well diversified, ranging from your metaphysics, epistemology, socio-political philosophy, philosophy of religion, aesthetics, logic, comparative philosophy, and whatnot. And his scholarship can be easily gleaned through his philosophical writings. The most prominent writing of Professor Sangal Pandeyji can be considered to be Pre-Shankar Advaita philosophy. It is on this Pre-Shankar Advaita philosophy he has been conferred the degree of D.Litt from Allahabad University, and that too honorary degree. He was not the student registered for D.Litt, but for this work, Pre-Shankar Advaita philosophy, he has been conferred D.Litt degree. And his other notable works are Wither Indian Philosophy, Existence, Devotion and Freedom, Perennials of Comparative Philosophy, Dynamics
Kindly,
of
kindly mute. Yes. Sir, go ahead. Sir, you are muted. Sir, you are muted.
So,
Yeah.
for how long period I was mute? Right from the
Sir,
beginning?
no, sir. 35 seconds. 30
35
seconds.
seconds. Although,
Yes.
okay. Although I have
Yes.
not touched any button. So, he has made immense philosophical contribution. And main philosophical concept is of depth epistemology, where he makes a distinction between depth epistemology and surface epistemology, and these two concepts are related to both your Indian as well as Western philosophy. But mainly it is related to your Indian epistemology. But even we can see its reflection in Western philosophy too, while making a comparison. He has formulated several seminal philosophical concepts. To begin with, it is the very famous concept is a concept of Lokayan, which advocates a rational restructure of society on the basis of moral and practical Vedanta. It is a logical culmination of social philosophies of Vivekanand, Mahatma Gandhi, and Ram Manohar Lohia. And then there is a concept of samdarshan in his philosophy. What is this samdarshan? It is a search for perspectives in philosophy. How we can have a perspective in philosophy? That is an attempt to synthesize your secular and moral values by by carefully avoiding the ills of modernity. And there's another concept which we find in the philosophical literature, that is the concept of ahar gyan. And this ahar gyan is an attempt to assimilate your bhakti, devotion with Advaitic philosophy. You see, normally your knowledge and bhakti, they are considered to be opposed to each other. No, they can be easily assimilated. And Professor Pandey has assimilated the two, bhakti and gyan, under the concept of ahari gyan. And there's a concept of ananita prasthan also, which asserts that the ultimate reality is distinguishable but not separable. The ultimate reality is distinguishable but not separable because there's no other object, as reality is ananya. Here I am reminded of the famous statement of Bradley when he was talking about the nature of absolute, that reality is divisible but not divided. The same type of treatment here we find in Ananta Prasthana. Professor Pandey has furnished four criteria of humanism. Number one, multidimensional nature of man. Then your principle of karuna, kindness, principle of humility, and the last one is the doctrine of human freedom. With this brief note, I'm coming to dwell upon depth epistemology and surface epistemology, making the neat distinction, and what can be the implications of depth epistemology, what he has tried to derive from such distinction of depth and surface epistemology, that we'll be seeing at the end. But before that, let me explain what is depth epistemology and how it is and how surface epistemology is different from form. Pandey has contrasted the depth epistemology with surface epistemology. Surface epistemology primarily deals with the source of knowledge, that is pramana, sources of knowledge, whereas depth epistemology is foundational to human experience. Now comes the question, what is knowledge? In depth epistemology, knowledge is considered to be trans-objective as well as trans-subjective. And the typical Advaitic term for it will be knowledge is aparokshanubhuti. Knowledge is aparokshanubhuti. The concept of depth epistemology has been introduced by Professor Pandey in his famous work, Problems of Depth Epistemology. This book contains four serious research papers of great scholars. The first paper is of Professor P.S. Bareil, and the title of the paper is The Criterion. And then comes then comes the paper of Professor R.D. Ranade. Its title is Doctrine of the Criterion. And then we have the third paper, The Foundations of Knowledge, that is of Professor A.C. Mukherjee. And the last one is coherence versus dialectic, that is of Professor R. N. Kaul. You see, Professor Pandey has written a beautiful introduction to this book, Problem Depth Epistemology. A beautiful long introduction, and the purpose of this introduction is to disclose is to disclose Allahabad School of Philosophy. This term was given by Professor Sanjay Lal Pandey. The tradition of Allahabad Philosophy Department, that is being given the name Allahabad School of Philosophy. And you see, your A.C. Mukherjee is considered to be the Plato of Allahabad School of Philosophy. As we have Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, in the similar manner, A.C. Mukherjee is considered uh, to be a Plato of Allahabad School of Philosophy. So, the Western epistemology, like rationalism, empiricism, criticism, realism, idealism, etc., are types of surface epistemology. Professor Pandey considers that all these philosophical treatment of West in the form of rationalism, empiricism, and Kantian criticism, they all come under surface epistemology. Why? Why they come under surface epistemology? The answer is quite clear to him, because they are related to the source of knowledge on the one hand, and the second ground for treating it as a surface epistemology is that entire knowledge situation is here on the empirical plane. On the empirical plane, depth epistemology, on the other hand, tries to discover the transcendental presuppositions of knowledge. Transcendental presuppositions of knowledge, and it gives importance to criteria, and it gives importance or preference to criteria or lakshan over sources of knowledge, that is praman. In Western philosophy also, we find different theories of criteria or criteriology. In Indian philosophy or in Indian epistemology too, we have a distinct trend of Lakshan Mimamsa. Lakshan Mimamsa, that is your criteria. So, Lakshan or criteria is to be given preference over your sources of knowledge, that is Praman. Knowledge is considered to be self luminous in a Advaitic tradition, in depth epistemology. Basically, depth epistemology is related with Advaitic tradition. In Advaitic tradition, knowledge is considered to be self luminous, as it illumines itself, as well as it is going to illumine the subject and object as well. So, knowledge is self luminous, Swayam Prakash, and it is attained immediately and trans reflectively. Again, the same term, aprokshanubhuti. Western philosophy distinguishes between superstructural and transcendental analysis of knowledge. And this debate of superstructural and transcendental analysis of knowledge goes back to your empiricist tradition that is being followed and that is being replaced by Kant in, in his critical philosophy. So the superstructural analysis that we find in the philosophy of Locke, Berkeley, and Hume, where all the ideas are of the same status or nature. And this concept is known as democracy of ideas, where all ideas are of the same status. There is no question of superiority or inferiority. All ideas are of the same status or nature. Democracy of ideas. But in transcendental analysis, which started with Immanuel Kant, talks about that some ideas to be of superstructural level, whereas remaining ideas are of transcendental level. And what can be the basic difference between transcendental level and your superstructural level of ideas? The difference will be your transcendental ideas is going to control and regulate your superstructural idea. So what we are finding over here we are finding oligarchy of ideas. Previously, in superstructural analysis, there was democracy of ideas. All are equal. Like in democracy, all men are equal. Similarly, in democracy of ideas, all ideas are equal. But when we move to transcendental analysis, there we find no, some ideas are of more relevance and other ideas are less relevant. So the less relevant ideas are superstructural idea, whereas transcendental ideas are prominent. In case of Kantian epistemology, we find the importance of categories. And here we have universal validity of categories. And apart from that, in Kantian epistemology, we have the concept of self also. And what is self? Self is considered to be the ultimate transcendental condition of experience. There can be no knowledge without the concept of self. Although in Kantian philosophy, it is called as transcendental synthetic unity of pure perception, but still you need some. Why you need transcendental synthetic unity of pure perception? Because your categories cannot automatically apply themselves on your manifold sense data. So for that you need your transcendental unity of pure perception, and categories are very much needed because without the application of categories in Kantian epistemology, no knowledge will be possible. So in Kantian epistemology, we find categories and self or unity of pure perception to be transcendental, to be of transcendental level. The proper subject matter of depth epistemology is that kind of knowledge which is both trans objective as well as transsubjective, both. It includes the knowledge of self, that is Atman, which is based on intuitive experience, again, aparokshanubhuti. There is no other way for realization of self. We cannot know the self through our reason or our senses. Yato vacho nivartante aprape mansa sa. So how can self be realized? For realization of self, we need aprokshanbhuti, immediate intuitive experience. That alone will provide us the knowledge of self. Professor Pandey has laid emphasis on criteriology. Again, moving to Lakshan. Lakshan. And this Lakshan or criteria is Swarup Gyan. It is Swarup Lakshan of knowledge. Lakshan is Swarup. And your Praman that can be treated as Tatas Lakshan. He upholds the openness of knowledge. This point is something worth appreciating. Professor Pandey talks about that in Indian philosophical tradition, we find the openness of knowledge. And this openness of knowledge is to be found more in our Indian philosophical tradition than your Western philosophical tradition. In Western philosophical tradition, we don't have such openness of knowledge, which we find in Indian philosophical tradition. Here, somebody may put question like this. Maybe Professor Pandey having predilections or liking to Indian philosophy. And for that reason, he's making this statement that there is openness of knowledge, more openness of knowledge in Indian philosophical tradition than your Western one. It can be said, but it is it is not it is not correct assessment. I also personally believe that in Indian philosophical tradition we have a more place for openness of knowledge. In Indian philosophical tradition, we don't have the concept of early and later. We don't have the concept of early and later, like early Wittgenstein and later Wittgenstein, early Russell and later Russell. That means the same philosopher changing his philosophical standpoint, say after 1 or 2 decades. But in Indian philosophy, we find continuity. We find continuity. Here we have openness of knowledge, and for that reason, and for that reason, still we have a school of Charvak, Mimamsa, Nyay, Vedant. We today, till today we have. That means tradition is going on. It is, it is a, it is a case, it is a dialogical in nature. It is in the form of dialogue, samvad, moving ahead. The 6 sources of knowledge, that is Praman, which we find in the Kumar Mimamsa and in Advaita Vedanta. For Pandeyji, it is a case of surface epistemology. Because whenever we are discussing about the sources of knowledge or Praman, then it is it is to be surface epistemology. And your 6 sources of knowledge are incomplete Praman. Here, something very important. The six sources of knowledge are incomplete praman, which is known as shesh praman, whereas your self knowledge or atmagyan is complete praman or shesh praman. What type of metaphysics this depth epistemology is going to build or formulate? The answer is quite simple. The nature of metaphysics in case of depth epistemology is bound to be self-centric metaphysics. It is self-centric metaphysics, not object-centric. If we try to classify metaphysics, although this classification is not exhaustive, there can be other models of metaphysics, but broadly speaking, if it is a case of self-centric metaphysics, it is idealistic tradition. If it is object-centric metaphysics, it will be a case of realistic metaphysics. And your Professor A.K. Chatterjee used to say like this: reality is such that it allows us complete freedom to formulate it. Reality is like such that it gives or provides us freedom. Reality is not your reality is not going to hinder, or it is not going to force us to conceive reality in a particular style. So your self-centric metaphysics, for self-centric metaphysics, he has given the term metaphysical narcissism, whereas your object-centric metaphysics, he has termed as metaphysical masochism. So the two terms, metaphysical narcissism and metaphysical masochism, the two terms which Professor A.K. Chatterjee used to. Even in his writing, you will find the two terms. For self-centric metaphysics, it is metaphysical narcissism, where realistic metaphysics is metaphysical masochism. The self-consciousness, Atma Chaitanya, is a seminal notion in idealistic philosophy of Ranade and Mukherjee. Self is transcendentalism, but not transcendentism. The two words, transcendentalism and transcendentism. Why it is not transcendentism? Because it is not beyond experience. And why it is transcendentalism? Because we always need self. For knowledge, we always need self. Knowledge is transcendental condition. It is transcendental condition of all our knowledge. It is transcendental presupposition. If you have, if you have, if knowledge is there, there must have to be a self or knower. The self is the witness of both known and unknown stages of object. That is called sarvasakshi. The self is sarvasakshi. Now I'm moving to the criterion or lakshan, and here we'll be seeing what differences can be seen, can be easily seen in the writings of your Baril, Ranade, Mukherjee, and Kaul. Very briefly, they all have accepted your criteria, that is your lakshan. But we can also see the different nature, the difference of nature regarding the lakshan. Criterion is another important issue of depth epistemology. Ranade considers criterion or lakshan to be self-evident and and it is to be internal in nature. Why it is to be internal in nature? This criterion or lakshan to be internal in nature because if this criteria or lakshan is external, then there will be the fallacy of infinite regress, anavastha dosh. There will be fallacy of infinite regress. The argument is this kind of argument can be also seen in the philosophy of Bradley because Bradley is also an idealistic philosopher. He is a absolute idealist, and Bradley too has rejected your external relations. And not only that, whatever we do receive through our rational categories for Bradley will be a case of appearance. The similar argument you can see in the philosophy of Ranade, where Ranade is talking about relations to be internal. Relations is to be internal, it cannot be external. And your criterion is to be self evident. Self evident means swatha pramana, self evident. In surface epistemology, we have extrinsic validity. And and your relation is to be external. In depth epistemology, reverse will be the case. Your validity is to be intrinsic, a relation is to be always internal. R.D Kaul, in his famous essay, Coherence versus Dialectic, tries to formulate the revised form of coherence. The revised form of coherence with Hegelian dialectic. And the purpose is to free it from its defect. So here we have a coherence as a criterion along with Hegelian dialectic so that your knowledge can grow because knowledge can grow only through dialectical process. So he has tried to combine two coherence theory of truth with Hegelian dialectic. This is the approach of Kaul. Barel was also against external criteria of truth and he has given two internal criteria that is of discretion, vivek, and and conscience. That is antaratma. He considers vivek to be the ultimate criterion of truth, whereas for Ranade, the ultimate criterion of truth is aprokshanbhuti, immediate intuitive experience. Mukherjee accepts transcendental or foundational analysis, and for him, intuition and intuition alone is to be treated as criterion. All considers coherence based upon immediate experience. This coherence is to be based upon immediate experience. This coherence is not rational coherence, right? This coherence is not rational coherence. Rather, it is to be based upon immediate experiences. Now, with this brief note, I'm trying to draw certain implications of Pandey's depth epistemology. And the implications can be put like this, that it is an inquiry into foundational consciousness. The first point of great epistemological significance is that it is an inquiry into foundational consciousness, that is Adhishthan Chaitanya, which is a logical presupposition of all objectivistic knowledge. And we all know the classical debate of Nyaya and Advaita Vedanta, whereas Nyaya talking about Parprakashatva, your Advaita Vedanta will be talking about self-luminosity of knowledge and consciousness, and then there your consciousness to be, in case of Nyaya, it is to be always intentional, but in case of Advaita Vedanta, it has to be reflective, pure consciousness, something like that, not intentional consciousness. Ultimately, although in Shankar's Advaita Vedanta, there's possibility of both kind of consciousness. There's possibility of both kind of consciousness also. In some cases, your consciousness can be intentional, but when higher order consciousness comes, that cannot be intentional one. That is there. Self-centric metaphysics is the thrust area of depth epistemology. Or it can be put like this: the logical extension of depth epistemology has to be your self centric metaphysics. And your self centric metaphysics means self is to be given prime importance over object. Then your depth epistemology considers Lakshana Mimamsa or criteriology to be a fundamental notion. And since it is a fundamental notion, so a preference to Lakshan is to be given over Praman. Because whenever we talk about Praman or sources of knowledge, that is your empirical level, and that is a case of only surface epistemology. So if one has to move from surface to depth epistemology, that means one has to think in terms of criteriology or criteria or Lakshan. Although in Indian philosophical tradition, your object is known through both. That means in knowing the object, we need both Praman as well as Lakshan. But in depth epistemology, your Lakshan or criterion is given prominence. It has been given preference over Praman. Pandeyji has maintained internal criterion of truth, that is Swatah Praman. In depth epistemology, and your surface epistemology is to be based upon your depth epistemology. Depth epistemology is foundational, whereas your surface epistemology can be treated as superficial. That means your surface epistemology needs a certain foundation. Your surface epistemology needs a certain foundation to be grounded. Your surface epistemology can be grounded only in depth epistemology. So your depth epistemology is basically a higher order analysis of knowledge situation. It is higher order analysis of knowledge situation. And finally, what can be the philosophical tool of depth epistemology? The philosophical tool for Pandeyji in-depth epistemology be only and only immediate intuitive experience, that is aprokshanbhuti. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And you have winded up your talk absolutely on time. So thank you so much. And we must say that this talk was from the first person perspective. It is, we can say, it is the tribute from the student to his teacher, and we are delighted to listen on Sangam Lal Pandey sir by his student. So this talk is now open for discussion and question answer. Yeah.
Okay, should I start with some
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
observations? So thank you, Dr. Shukla. And in fact, it's after a fairly long interval that I could hear about Professor Sangam Lal Pandey. When Dr. Shipra was thinking of having philosophical cafe of the past 100 years last year, so we thought that Professor Sangam Lal Pandey must come up. Though there are many people from Allahabad University, A.C. Mukherjee is there, T.N. Kaul is there, Byrne is there, and even S.S. Roy, though very complicated. And but Professor Sangam Lal Pandey is Ranade is of course the founder one.
Yeah.
And but we have very few experts on all these philosophers. And Professor Sangam Lal Pandey is the one who was my teacher and perhaps your teacher also. And he wrote on wide range of topics, not only from pure philosophical, metaphysical, ethical issues, but also on socio-political philosophy. And he was engaged practically also in all these activities. Yeah. So he was multidimensional. I remember in the early 1990s, there was one national conference on the philosophical contributions of Professor Sangam Lal Pandey. And I had gone there to Allahabad University and presented a paper.
Director
also.
was Professor Ramlal Singh Ji. Professor Ramlal Singh Ji was the director of the seminar. And after that, so many seminars of ICPR has been conducted on the philosophy of Professor Sangam Lal Pandey. Not only one, several times.
Okay. Then I didn't have any opportunity to participate in those seminars. I don't know. Right. So, but this one I had gone there. And
we have met each other. So we have met each other.
Pandey, and Professor Sangam Lal Pandey also had attended. He was present there all through, though he had lost the sight, and but he was mentally fully alert.
Sir, matlab he was responding. He was responding to all the questions and queries. Very alert.
He was mentally absolutely alert and very confident. And
very confident.
And he, in fact, stuck to his position of the 1950s, 60s, and maybe little bit of 70s, but not beyond that. So there were many problems, issues, and I had raised also that sometimes you can imagine 1990s period was a period of great change globally. There was a socialism which had collapsed. There was rethinking of socialism. There was rethinking of democracy. There was a rethinking of the philosophical basis of all these things. Globalization, multiculturalism, very many things, liberalization, neoliberal policies. So global world order, everything was changing. And philosophy cannot remain silent on all these things. I have presented the paper which was published later in the book also, Rethinking Democracy and Secularism in Indian context, something like that. Yeah, I remember. So I congratulate you from the bottom of my heart to have taken up this issue, and you have really done a great job. And 2-3 observations I would like to place before you. And in fact, I had chatted with Professor Pandey also privately during that seminar. And one thing is that you have very nicely picked up the main issue is the criterion. In the depth epistemology and the surface epistemology, the role which is played is by the criteria that you follow. And uh, criteria is either traditionally available to us and with the help of the shastras and the mantras and the definitions, the sutras and everything else, the pramanas which are there. This is one way of having it. The other thing is that revisiting that criteria. Look at Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna. He said, what is the pramana of the pratyaksha? The first pramana. And he said that, can you establish it? It's so momentary. How will you go to establish it? Yeah. And the same thing was done by even Hegel against Kant's categories. That what is the, you have 12 categories. What is so strange about 12? Neither more nor less. And what is the, category of the first category? You have the quantity, quality. You go back to Aristotle and say that my friend Aristotle has done it. So I'll begin with that, but I'll add. Yeah. Because in every class, in every lecture, Kant used to begin with Aristotle only. And but he tried to modify it. Or we can go back to what, and this is an area which I have worked substantially, is the critical theorist Theodore W. Adorno, a book, very prominent book against epistemology. So he has also, he said that epistemology I'm not challenging, let it survive. But the criteria on the basis of which that epistemology stands, that I have to question. And I have to write. I have every right to question that thing. Yeah. So, and then I just, use this argument to establish one position that look in the liberalism, and Kant was a liberal philosopher. Equality, freedom, fraternity, and everything was there. But collective equality, collective freedom, which comes to us, or some kind of unity which comes to us with globalization and multiculturalism, that has to be rethought, because the concepts evolve. Concepts get elevated. We cannot live in the world of Plato. And, there are a lot of things to talk about it. And one more thing which I had personally discussed with him, this is just a kind of, memories which are coming up, and it's a very intense kind of a thing, is that let's not waste time on East and West kind of philosophical debates and discussions, because if you look at these continents, these oceans, they not only distinguish one continent from another, but they also, relate them. We move, from one idea to another idea. So concepts get unified. Philosophy is after philosophy.
True, sir.
True, sir. True. So there is a time where you have to open up the eyes and see the whole world. And there is, some kind of transmission of civilizations, of cultures. Nothing is solo these days. We need to have pluralistic perspective, diverse perspectives, diversity of things, and no concept is fixed once and for all. They change also. Only then they can cope up with the reality, because changing aspect of reality is a fact, and philosophy has to satisfy that requirement. You cannot just fix the reality on the basis of fixed concept. And then Nagarjuna will be a great help. Yeah. So many things are there, but Dr. Sanjay, I really appreciate you have taken up the issue. And may I request Dr. Shipra to have, if there is a time, she can have can organize a kind of 2-3 persons can have a symposium kind of a thing, briefly taking it, because he was a larger than life personality, Professor SANGAM LAL Pandey. So he cannot be exhausted, kind of thing. But it depends on her. and depends on other engagements
How
and all
how
other
to
things.
organize such
Yes,
kind of
Yeah,
we can
and
organize
there are
panel
people.
discussion and one-day symposium also,
Yes,
sir. It's very
yes,
We are
yes.
can
thinking
be.
great
about
idea.
Dr. Singh's. We are thinking about that to organize.
Great, great. Yes, yes, Dr. Rajkumar, I wanted to appeal to you also
Yeah.
because
Hmm.
it's let us because not just I did my graduation post graduation from Allahabad University, but I learned a lot. I had invited him many times at JNU also. So and every time he was coming either to the UPSC kind of a thing or the UGC meetings, he used to inform me, and many times he had visited here in the School of Language, Literature and Culture. Those days I was there, had given lectures also, and his journal, Samadarasan,
Samadarshan.
was launched. Yeah, it was launched during that period of time. So I think a couple of articles I also have got published in that journal. I don't know what is the fate of it any, at this stage. Rishi Kant told me that he is holding it and he is doing the job. Sometimes back I had received some copies, but I think it should survive. If not in the hardbound, at least online kind of a thing, which could be economically feasible, because these days people are going to that. So these are just haywire ideas, not well composed. Because I was in Amritsar, just came back here daily, and tomorrow again I have to. Day after tomorrow again I have to go there. So thank you very much, and over to
Thank you,
you,
sir.
Dr.
Thank you, sir. So you can also invite us there in Amritsar for some
Yeah, sure.
symposium.
So they are actually we are having two, three seminars there. One is on interfaith, and the other is on ecology and sustainable development. These two and periodic lectures are there, just to making it something more active there. So anyway, so over to you now, Dr.
Yeah,
Shukla.
thank you, sir. Thank you. Professor Sucheta. Yeah. Professor Sucheta, do you want to say something? You are muted. Ma'am, you are muted. Yeah. Okay. There's one. Yeah. Professor Dr. Zeronisha. Yeah, she wants
Yes.
something. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sanjay sir.
You
It
are
was
also
such
from
a nice
Allahabad
meet.
University.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have my masters from Allahabad University. As well as
Okay.
I had an opportunity to interact with you when we were having this workshop on Kant's perpetual peace, and you have delivered one of the amazing lectures, and we cannot forget it was just a one paragraph, and you had delivered 2 hour lecture on that one paragraph. I really appreciate the way you have explained each nook and corner of Kant's philosophy on that paragraph.
Super.
Amazing.
Thank you. Thank
Amazing.
you. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you for both
So,
your appreciation. Thank you.
Sanjay sir, one of the things when I was in Allahabad, we were introduced by this concept of depth epistemology, and
Mhm.
little bit hard to understand at that time also, and right now also. I'm really sorry I had to go time and time again in between the lecture, so I'm not sure if I have listened your lecture properly, but still I want some clarification which Sangam Lal Pandey sir has given related to epistemology, and he has
Okay.
bifurcated two kind of epistemology. One was the depth
Right,
epistemology,
ma'am.
another one is the surface epistemology, if I am
Sure.
not
Sure.
forgetting. So could you
No, no,
just
you are
explain
absolutely
me
right, ma'am.
again? Yeah, could you just explain me again the difference between these two, as well as how
Okay.
it is different from the Western ideology of epistemology? Because the very terminology of epistemology we have borrowed from Western world. So how it is different from Sangam Lal Pandey's concept of surface and depth epistemology? Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you for putting question. Uh, First of all, the distinction of depth epistemology and surface epistemology is very fundamental and very basic. You see, when we are talking about simply sources of knowledge, that is your praman. For example, there is a bottle in front of me, and how I come to know that there's a bottle in front of me? That is through perception. That is here, your perception can be one source of knowledge. So, this is your surface epistemology. When you are talking about the sources of knowledge, how do we acquire knowledge? What can be the genuine source of knowledge? That is your praman. But once you move ahead of sources of knowledge and praman, then comes the realm of lakshan. That is called criteria. So, criteria or lakshan is of greater relevance than your concept of praman. So this is your depth epistemology. When you talk about the criterion, lakshana, then it is a case of depth epistemology. And when you talk about sources of knowledge, it is a case of surface epistemology. Surface epistemology is basically empirical in nature. It is basically empirical. It has empirical foundation, empirical in nature. But in case of depth epistemology, the philosophical tool, as I have already pointed out in my lecture, has to be only aprokshanbhuti, immediate intuitive experience. Actually, who is going to support depth epistemology? Foundational analysis of experience? Idealistic school. Idealistic philosophers will support a kind of epistemology which is known as depth epistemology, where your intrinsic validity, internal relations, and criteria, your lakshan, is of great relevance. Whereas in case of realistic metaphysics, the more emphasis will be on your sources of knowledge, praman, and that will be object-centric metaphysics, and depth epistemology is self-centric metaphysics. The basic difference can be stated like this. One more thing, this kind of distinction of depth epistemology and surface epistemology uh, can be compared with the concept of your deep ecology and shallow ecology, right? Arnenis, deep ecology and shallow ecology. Similarly, your depth epistemology and your surface epistemology. Deeper analysis of nature, that will be deep ecology, where nature is given intrinsic worth. Whereas in case of shallow ecology, nature is only instrumental value. I'm giving an analogy. Similarly, in case of your depth epistemology and your surface epistemology, in surface epistemology, the only thing worth remembering or worth appreciating is praman. And what is praman? Pramakarnam pramanam. Right? Praman is the unique cause of prama. And what is prama? Prama is yatharth gyan.
Yeah.
But when we go forward, when we look into criteria or mimamsa, so there your criteria or mimamsa is more fundamental analysis than your simply analyzing the sources of knowledge. This is the basic difference. Okay, ma'am?
Yes, I'm listening, sir. I'm listening.
Ah,
Yeah.
It is
this
clarified, I
much
think.
can be said.
So if
This much
you
can be
say,
said very briefly. Yes.
yeah, sir, if you say that it means that depth epistemology is like deeper understanding of any knowledge, and it, I feel that touch the transcendental to some extent, right? If you are saying
Okay.
that depth epistemology is related to something which is intuitive by nature, right? Is it
It can
something
be
like
said.
that?
It is. It is basically depth epistemology is related to experience, foundational experience. When we talk about foundational experience, deep rooted experience, there comes your depth epistemology. And whenever you want to have a foundational analysis of experience, there your reason, your आपके senses, or or the sources of knowledge or praman will not do. These pramanas have to commit suicide. May I use this expression? Your pramanas have to commit suicide because they cannot be they cannot be applied. Your pramanas are meant only for empirical discourse. And when we move from empirical to something transcendental, when we talk about your Brahman realization or Atmic realization, this is not possible through Praman. No, not at all. So that will be higher analysis of knowledge or higher analysis of experience. It's better to speak. It is higher analysis of experience, and that is possible only intuitively. That is trans-objective, trans-subjective, transcending both. And at the same time, it is fundamental presupposition of all our knowledge.
So, sir,
Yeah,
I have a question again.
doubt.
When it is
Yeah,
very
sure.
transcend, yeah. So it's a wonderful explanation. But again, I have a question. If depth epistemology is a transcendental experience, so this experience cannot be universalized because it is very much subjective by nature, and anything which is subjective cannot be objectivized or cannot be universalized. So, how Sangam Lal Pandey sir has explained about depth epistemology, which cannot be universalized or generalized, because
Okay.
transcendental, anything which is transcendental, cannot be explained, cannot be, uh, defined through our limited
Okay. Okay. Okay.
worldly and knowledge. Yeah.
Okay. First of all, you are confusing the term transcendental. Transcendental means what? Transcendental means foundational, something foundational. And transcendentalism doesn't mean transcendentism. It is not beyond experience. And one more thing, let us have a debate in this manner. I believe in immediate intuitive experiences, aprokshanbhuti. And somebody is skeptical about immediate intuitive experience. Might be that person has not realized or have not felt that kind of experience. So just because he has not felt it or not realized, it doesn't mean that there cannot be. And why you are trying to universalize? You tell me, what's the need? Your universalization is needed in scientific knowledge. When we talk about scientific knowledge, that needs proof. And something is, and in some cases, it is beyond proof. Acha, what proof can be offered for the existence of self? I'm putting you a simple question. Self is beyond all doubts and proof because the very moment you doubt the self, you establish the existence of self. And the argument can be like this. So there's not always the need to universalize. And whenever there is a case of immediate intuitive experience, that knowledge can never be universalized, and there is no need also to universalize it because it is not meant for Tom, Dick, and Harry. It is not for commoner. Others may not realize, or others may not feel it. For others, your empirical discourse and pramanas are enough. But one who is seeker of truth, one who wants to have a atmic realization, then he will have to take the recourse of aprokshanbhuti. Or one has to take the recourse of shruti. One has to take the recourse of faith. In Kant, it is a recourse to faith. In Advaitic or in Indian philosophy tradition, it is a recourse to Shruti. And similarly, Aprokshanbhuti is a philosophical tool, may not be available to all of us. Even it is not available to me. It is not available to me. No issue. Hmm?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Zero.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much
I
for
hope,
your answer.
yeah. We will listen to you some another day on this topic. And we are grateful to have you, sir, in our cafe and
There
listen.
there is a question on the chat box.
Okay.
We
Can
are
I
ahead
see
of
it
time.
right now?
Let me tell this
From Prashant Shukla, sir.
Dr.
Yeah.
Prashant Shukla, self-centric metaphysics is an idealistic tradition. But why, sir, are we exclusively talking of
Talking of Berkeley.
Self-centric metaphysics belongs to a better idealistic tradition. Then what next?
So
His
are
question
we
is why it
exclusively
is
talking of Berkeley here?
no, Sir Berkeley is another philosopher.
No,
He is asking,
no,
yeah.
no. I've never talked about Berkeley uh, in deliberation while talking about self-centric metaphysics. When I was talking about depth epistemology, then I
So
said
I
depth epistemology has metaphysical shape of self-centric metaphysics. It has nothing to do with Berkeley.
no, sir. Let me
Berkeley
reframe.
is Berkeley
He,
is Berkeley is an epistemological idealist, SAS per CP. But here, idealistic tradition, which I was referring to, was the idealistic tradition of Upanishad and Advaita Vedanta. Nothing to do with your Berkeley, Fichte, Schelling, Hegel, Bradley. Up to some
uh,
extent, Bradley can be compared to your Advaitic philosophy, but there is still a difference, your cultural perspective, difference of cultural perspective. You cannot uh, put Bradley and Shankaracharya on the same line.
so I think
Yes.
he is asking that if we are talking about idealistic tradition, so
Yeah.
are we discussing and talking about Berkeley's philosophy? This is his question,
No.
I think. Yeah,
One more thing. One more thing. Your this idealistic tradition
tradition.
is
Yeah,
not a monolithic structure. Your idealistic
yeah.
tradition is not a monolithic structure, which we all know and we should know. It is not a monolithic structure having one shade. In idealism, we have different shades that we all know. Yeah, that is your idealism can be of different shades, like your metaphysical idealism, epistemological idealism, ethical idealism, aesthetic idealism. There are different shades of idealism, and then and then we can have a subjective idealism, objective idealism, absolute idealism. So there's not that is your idealism is not a single unified philosophy. It has different shades. Your Berkeley and Bradley, they are entirely different. We cannot compare Berkeley and Bradley. We cannot compare your Hegel with Bradley. We cannot compare your Kant with Bradley. But they all are considered as an idealist philosopher. That's
Okay.
there.
The
So
question was
there's
from
no need
Prashant
to
Shukla,
put,
sir. Yeah, and he is
yeah,
not here. Yeah, he is not here. So,
if there's a
okay.
question, I will try to respond.
Yes, sir. I think there is no other question, and we are. Uh,
Pardon?
yes, sir. We have no other questions, sir. So we are thankful and grateful
Yeah,
to have you in the cafe. And Shukla, sir,
and
I'm sincerely thankful to you for accepting our invitation and coming to our cafe. We hope to have you again in Philosophy Cafe and listening to
yeah,
you
sure,
on
sure.
another
And
topic.
pleasure is mine. And
Yeah,
pleasure is mine. And you people are doing a wonderful thing. Your people are doing wonderful thing.
thank you, sir. Thank you.
Go ahead. Go
Thank you so
ahead.
much. Yeah. And my sincere thanks to all our audience and our teachers, especially my teacher, R.P. Singh sir. Thank you for joining us. And we'll meet again on 21st of April with new speaker on the new topic. Since then, namaste.